What is up, YouTube? I'm going to show you guys how I made this lead. Using Dimitri Shesh's Thorn plugin. Let's dive in and have a look. So let's have a look at the MIDI. So it's a pretty simple idea. If you can kind of hear, the lead line is kind of doing a similar sort of melodic pattern to the bass. Essentially, what I did was I just copied the bass's MIDI pattern, and you'll notice that in some of the places where the sort of kick is placed, you know, generally with a sort of Psytrance sort of bass pattern, your bass and your kick don't overlap. So what I've done is I've just sort of randomly moved some of those first notes over to coincide with the kick. I'll play it for you with the init patch so you can kind of hear what's actually going on there. So the basis of the sound, like a lot of the sort of like robotic type of sounds that I do on my channel, is FM. But the difference here is that it uses one of the sort of Thorn, I don't want to call them warp modes because it is kind of slightly different to like serums, but this sort of like phaser effect on the FM carrier. So what we want to do is, for Oscillator 1, we want to leave these settings pretty much at default for now. Let's just open up Oscillator 2 by clicking this button over here, and we can choose one of these basic sine waves like this. So because it's the FM carrier, we don't necessarily want to hear the audio of this. We can immediately just turn it down before getting into the sort of nitty-gritty of the actual patch. So here with the sort of Oscillator 1's sort of mode, let's set this to FM, and let's turn this around up to around 80% or so. So far, this is what we've got. And we also want to turn this octave of Oscillator 2 down to -1. And this is what we should have so far. Cool, so there's a bit of sort of like tail overlap on the sound, and we do kind of want a little bit of that kind of release on the sound to make it kind of sound a little bit more natural. But to sort of stop them from overlapping, we can set this to monophonic mode over here. So now let's listen to the sound, the sort of difference that it makes when we use this phaser effect on Oscillator 2. So we can set this up to about 75% or so, anywhere around there. So it almost kind of like adds that extra layer of harmonics. So if you want to get sort of more drastic, you can switch to Screamer. That's going to be like really, really sort of screechy, robotic kind of stuff. I don't want to go all that kind of crazy. I think phaser does sound a little bit better. For what we're going for now. We're not going for like a crazy sort of thing. Although in a build-up or something like that, it might be cool to kind of like bounce out both variations and maybe the sort of Screamer version slowly kind of like build it up over a sort of build-up loop or something like that. So anyway, this is the kind of like basis of the oscillators. That's kind of like that kind of like robotic texture that those oscillators are creating. It's essentially just FM and phase on Oscillator 2. So generally speaking, like when I'm creating a sort of like lead sound or something like that, I rely on like the filter to create the movement. And in this particular example, I didn't do that because Thorn has this really cool kind of like re-trigger engine built in over here, or it's called the glitch sequencer. And I kind of used that to create a kind of like rhythmic sort of variation in the patch, as opposed to how I would usually kind of assign an envelope to a filter or something like that. Knowing I was going to kind of take this approach, I bypassed the filter immediately. However, I did want to use this harmonic filter to create a sort of like variation on the actual tone of the sound itself, rather than kind of like sweeping it like I would usually do with a filter or something like that. So I found Pulse 2 sounded really good with this sound that we had created, and I shifted the shape down to about 28% around there. and the balance up to 60%. So this is the variation that it created. I mean, you can always, you can vary this if you want to create your own sort of unique sounds, but it's cool to create a patch like this, and then, you know, just cycle through the different filters to quickly create a bunch of different variations of that same sort of like robotic texture, but through a bunch of different kind of like filter sounds. Cool, so that's the harmonic filter. So this glitch sequencer over here, I used this to create a kind of rhythmical pattern to kind of like emulate the way like a sort of robot or machine would kind of move, using this kind of like retrigger generator over here. It's basically this line over here, and these, you swipe upwards to create the sort of amount of retrigger. So first things first, what we want to do is we want to set the sync to envelope, so it doesn't re-trigger every time a key is pressed. And we want to set the speed to 1/16 and turn the mix all the way up. So here, let's go 2, 2, and then in this one, let's do 1, and then the last one, do 1, 2. So let's listen to how this sounds. So here we're going to want to edit our amp envelope settings just a little bit. We can leave the release as is, but let's just turn this sustain down and the decay down slightly. So what that's going to do is it's now going to create like a pluck on the beginning of every sort of like 16th or wherever there is actually a note. And whenever there's a retrigger, that pluck will kind of like be extended. So it'll retrigger essentially. So let's have a listen to what that sounds like. Another one of the cool things about Thorn is this MSEG. It's like a stepper modulator sort of built in here. So what we want to do is we want to use this. We can just drag it over to modulate the decay of the amp envelope. Let's go over to the mod matrix and set the amount to 38%. Don't ask me why, but that just kind of worked. And so here we can actually turn this down very, very low, like 3%. And then we'll use this to kind of like create, you know, the like open and closing of that decay pattern. So let's set this to something like this. Cool. Let's see how that sounds. The cool thing about Thorn is you've got the ability to do this like re-trigger glitchy effect either before or after the effects. And I like to do it after because then you can kind of like put like distortions and reverbs and stuff like that and then like chop those to the kind of like re-trigger. And that accentuates that kind of like re-trigger movement even more. So let's head over to the effects section. Let's turn on this distortion and turn the drive down ever so slightly and turn the mix down. We don't want to go too crazy with this. Let's just hear how that sounds. Cool. Let's put on reverb and let's put on some compression. Let's listen to this. So then I added the usual suspects, delay and reverb and some EQ, just to kind of like round out the overall sound to make it kind of like fit a bit better into the mix. So yeah, that's pretty much it from that sound. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. A big thanks to IDM Mag, proud supporters of the dance music scene and my channel. I'm going to be posting this preset onto my Patreon for my $5 supporters, so if you want to know what that's all about, check out the link that's going to be somewhere on the screen right now. As always, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time.